A lot of big box stores are ordering goods because they're not sure what the economy is going to be. Should I order a lot of this or a lot of that? But you know what? There's so much shipping out there. I'll just order everything and I'll bring it in. And what it does is it creates a lot of stress on warehouses, distribution centers, and it really it overawes the supply chain.
So, hi, I'm Wendy, a communication strategist at Software Logic. The supply chain, as you know, is so unpredictable, and best business practices over the last few decades have now been replaced with new best business practices because of this new way of life and work that has evolved. The supply chain has come with many challenges, such as labor shortages, inconsistent carrier rates, technology implementations, so forth. So here at SFL, we are always dedicated to provide our customers with the latest industry news and insights. And how better to do that than listening to some of the experts in the industry. So today I'm pleased to have Sal from many of you may know that he has a great YouTube podcast called What's Going On with Shipping. Currently he's sitting with over 50,000 subscribers. Uh, Salvatore, also known as Sal, is an experienced professor in policy, maritime operations, and history. Sal is also an educator in all aspects of the shipping industry. His knowledge is widely spread through his YouTube podcast channel, as I mentioned. And he was also mentioned recently in a Flexport article as one of the top 55 supply chain and logistics experts to follow on social media. So today at SFL, we are very happy to have you on board and have you meeting with us, Sal. So thank you for joining me today. It's an absolute pleasure having you here today.
No, it's a pleasure to be with you, Wendy. I appreciate the opportunity. I always jump on the chance to talk about supply chain. So happy to be here.
That's amazing. So yes, let's talk about you and this YouTube podcast. What's going on in shipping? Maybe you can tell us a little bit about how that journey of like how did it from a journey of a professor and now from a YouTube sensation? How has that started, and how has that experience been for you?
Sure. So I never intended for this to happen at all. So I was, as you mentioned, a history professor, and I do maritime history, but I do teach courses in maritime industry policy for the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy. And as such, I started writing articles contributing to an online website called GCaptain. And so I was writing articles on policy and issues associated with it. And it really, where I got started was the Ever Given going sideways in the Suez Canal. GCaptain got contacted by BBC World looking for some experts to talk about shipping and ship policy and how this could happen. And the editor in chief basically recommended me. So I went on this BBC World broadcast the day the Ever Given went sideways in the Suez, and had a great experience with it. The producer came on afterwards and said, "You were really good. You were quick. You were concise. You had a lot of knowledge, and we're going to use you more." And that began a 6-day journey of nonstop news and broadcasting. But when you do a hit for BBC News or these other news sites, it's pretty quick. It's a couple of minutes, and you don't quite get a chance to go into a lot of detail. Well, I had a YouTube channel where I'd been posting lectures and some presentations I've done. So I decided, well, let me go ahead and go a little bit more in detail here. And I'll do like an hour-long YouTube video on Ever Given. And prior to my starting that, I had maybe 300 subscribers. And I think the day before the Ever Given went ashore, I had 3 views. The next day, I had 3,000 views. And as you mentioned now, approaching 50,000 subscribers and almost 5 million views. And so it morphed from following what's going on in the Suez with the Ever Given to looking at the ever evolving supply chain crisis. And what I've tried to do is really make shipping understandable by people who are not in the shipping industry. It's an industry that a lot of people know about, but they don't know the details of it. And I would argue that many within shipping and the supply chain are very good at talking among themselves, but not very good to talk to people outside of it and really provide some expert and some insightful information on what's happening. So as a historian, I'm used to looking at a lot of data, a lot of information, and condensing it down and making it in a presentable format. And that's what I've done. So, I've looked at Ever Given, I've looked at the supply chain crisis, I've looked at different elements of shipping, bulk shipping, tankers, containers, you name it. Really, whatever is in the news, and try to make it accessible to everybody.
That's amazing. I've actually watched some of your videos, and I mean that's why I really want to get in contact with you. I mean, so obviously your journey has allowed you to see these challenges and events in a more unique way, I would say. And in one of your podcast videos, you mentioned about carrier rates, and that really stuck with me because you said how the carrier rates have dropped significantly. But if you actually compare it to last year, yes, there is a drop, but it still hasn't reached that pre-COVID rate yet. And do you think that it will ever reach that pre-COVID rate? And how does this variation of carrier rates now affect freight forwarders and other logistic companies?
Yeah, it was interesting because, we all of a sudden you saw in the news that freight rates are falling, and everyone was kind of celebrating that. And my opinion of it is freight rates were at the Mount Everest level. I mean, they were at the highest they had ever been. And they were coming down, but they were coming down the backside of Everest, which is still very dangerous. You're still halfway up the tallest mountain that's ever existed. And so you can't get comfortable with that because freight rates are still 3 times higher than they were pre-COVID. And one of the things that we had to analyze was okay, it looks better than it did before, but it's still a lot higher than it's been.
Yeah.
And I think it was very important to take a step back and sit there and say, okay, well, what's different now than it was back then? Because I don't think freight rates are going to go down to that pre-COVID level unless we have a huge economic recession akin to what we saw in 2008, where the ocean carriers are really fighting for cargo. I don't think that's going to happen because I think the ocean carriers, especially the big 9 carriers and the 3 alliances, everyone from Maersk down to Yangmin, have learned a very important lesson. I think they've learned, okay, we have got to be able to adjust the availability of our ships to accommodate the cargo that's out there. And what we're seeing right now is ocean carriers blank sailing. They're canceling sailing of vessels to keep those freight rates stabilized. And if you look at the profitability of the big 9 carriers over the last decade, the 2010s, what you see is some years they made money, some years they didn't, and they were always kind of ping-ponging, Wimbledon back and forth between profitability and not. Now that's not the case. 2021, they made more profit in a year than they've done in the past decade. And I think one of the things we're seeing is the ocean carriers are really realizing, okay, we need to be much smarter in how we do things. They had suffered as a result of the recession of 2008. And they're going to try to orchestrate it so that they can keep freight rates at a much higher level than they were. They weren't making money before. And the only way they were making money was really slow steaming the vessels and offering a lot of incentives to ship with them. And that's not the case now, because one of the things we're seeing is we keep hearing about this freight recession, that demand is down because of inflation, yet we just saw June come in at one of the highest levels of container shipping we've ever seen. And ports are, full to the rim with containers. And it's no longer just LA and Long Beach that's happening. This is a global phenomenon we're seeing now. We're seeing it on the East and Gulf Coast of the United States. We're seeing it in Europe. We're seeing it out of the Asian ports. And we're seeing a repeat of last year in many ways, but there are obviously differences that are causing this. Last year it was insatiable demand and a shift in the economy from COVID, from pre-COVID to COVID. Now what we're seeing is a lot of logistics bottlenecks forming ashore. It only takes 2 years to build an ultra large container ship. It takes 10 years to build infrastructure to handle that vessel ashore.
Absolutely. Yes, I totally agree with you. I mean, you broke it down so nicely. And as you said, you mentioned also prior in one of your videos, like Long Beach now, the port congestion is not as bad as the way it used to be. And many of the times, some of the congestion is actually occurring because of the infrastructure at the port. There's not enough space for those containers to be held there, and that's actually holding up the process. So this is where you get the economy being affected, and you've seen that. I mean, we've seen that when you've done your mapping, and you've seen how many vessels have been anchored there, while the containers are just lying in the port. And I think whose fault is that if there's no infrastructure for that?
And it's if I could just add one thing, what really makes
Sure.
my YouTube channel, I think, a very unique thing is, I look at the data everybody looks at. I look at, the port reports and all the data that comes out. But at the same time, because of my social media presence, I'll get notes from crane operators in the terminal. I'll get it from truck drivers. And so, you get a very unique perspective. It's like, well, yeah, we've got ships waiting off, but the berths are empty because we can't get rail in, we can't get trucks in, or the gates aren't working. And so one of the interesting things about a YouTube channel is you get everybody involved in the process who are sitting there saying, well, listen, this is what's actually happening on the ground. And I think that really provides me with a very unique access to some information because, again, as a neutral party, I don't work for a shipping company. I don't work for even a news outlet. It's just, I'm a tenured professor. You can't fire me. So, I can just do this on my own. And so I can report on these things, and not everybody likes it when I say some things. It's like, I really wish you went ahead and said that, but it's the truth. This is what's going on.
The facts always stirs up something, huh? Yeah. So as we're saying, as you said it, like the way you break it down is actually amazing for us to actually understand, because it's important because it's not only the shippers and the logistic people that need to understand what's happening in the shipping industry. It's everyone in every industry, is because there's logistics involved in every industry. And that's a great way of you showcasing that to us. Specifically, I would like to know, what are your views on the Russia and Ukraine war, and now with the raw materials being limited in some countries, specifically fuel, and how is that affected the industry, specifically the transportation industry, road freight? How do these transporters now survive or move forward with the fuel costs now, almost the same as they revenue that they're getting through.
Well, I think one of the things we see very clearly, and this has been it really initiated with COVID, is how interdependent the world is on all aspects of transportation, manufacturing, logistics. We have truly globalized. I'm a history professor, and I'll talk about the fact how the world's always been globalized, and you can find Chinese coins in the city of Pompeii that was destroyed by a volcano. But in truth, that was very small. But that's not the case today. Post World War II, our economies have become integrated. There's so much manufacturing and raw materials shifting over around the world that any disruption causes a problem. And we've been very, I would say, isolated from that, because what we've seen is issues happen, but we've been able to overcome them. But what COVID has done is stirred the water up. And so now, the swimming pool of trade is just rough. It's rough water, and it's not coming down. And every time a new event happens, it just contributes to that more. And the Russia-Ukraine war is one of the big ones. I think this would have caused major problems even without COVID. But doing it in the backdrop of COVID has created massive problems. So you've got a couple of things there. You got, the F's that you got, three F's you got to deal with: food, fuel, and fertilizer. So, the food issue is absolutely paramount. The fact that Ukraine cannot get grain out is important. It usually exports 6 million tons of grain a month, and it's barely getting 1.5 million tons out. That's a factor for Africa. That's a fact for the Middle East. That's a factor for Asia. Certain countries, Somalia, Eritrea, a few other ones, get almost 100% of their food imported to them. And now that food is unavailable. Now, traditionally, you'd be able to get it from other sources. Maybe we'll get it from India, for example. But India is suffering a terrible drought right now. And so their production is down. Congestion on the west coast of the United States is making it difficult to export agricultural items out because of the demand for empty containers in Asia. And so all those issues get exasperated by the conflict in Russia. Fuel, I mean, obviously, the LNG is probably one of the most important ones, and crude oil. Russia is a huge exporter of energy in the world. And now all of a sudden, you have to supplement that with other aspects. So all of a sudden, the United States becomes the world's largest LNG exporter alongside Qatar and Australia. But then you have an explosion at the Freeport terminal, and now all of a sudden, U.S. LNG exports go down. And you have the potential for really a energy crisis come wintertime in Europe. Diesel fuel. I mean, diesel fuel was recorded as being the cheap, dirty fuel. It will always be economical, but what we're seeing is ridiculously high diesel fuel costs, which impact transportation. We're talking about not just trucks, but rail. We're talking about ships. This becomes a massive problem on top of everything else. And then you get to the fertilizer elements, the raw material, the unique minerals that come out of Russia and Ukraine. If we can't get fertilizer out, that's going to impact the next year's food supply. So food supply is already had a problem. And now what you're seeing is potentially lower yields come in. And I think one of the things that I've tried to do is really explain how an issue in a far corner of the world impacts you at the store. You know, when you go shopping, this is going to have an impact. It doesn't matter if it's a half a world away on a little cul-de-sac off the Mediterranean known as the Black Sea. It has ramifications across. When one issue happens, it kind of butterfly effects, dominoes, whatever you want to use as the simile here, around the world. And that's what I try to put into context many times, is this is how it's going to affect you individually, the consumer.
Yes, absolutely. And talking about the consumer, as you said, how it affects the consumer. I mean, we've known how the consumer demand has changed over the last 24 months, where the type of demand of what is requested from consumers has changed. But do you think now that I think we've nearing the pandemic? I mean, I'm in South Africa and we don't even use masks anymore. That is not even everything is back to normal. It's like COVID never existed. Yeah, again, we don't even follow the stats on TV anymore. So do you think there's ever like going to be a point where the consumer demand is going to come back to how it originally was in terms of the types of goods that they requested? And now are we transforming now from services into a more good space? What are your predictions?
No, I think you hit on a very important point, Wendy, is, prior to COVID, supply chain kind of knew what people were buying. They can estimate, they had a good idea for it. For example, in the US, you have to, 120 to 180 days in advance order things. I talk to people all the time. They're so used to pushing that button on their phone, and Amazon or whatever delivery service you use delivers the product within 2 to 3 days, and people can watch it on their phone. What they don't understand is 120 to 180 days before you hit that button, that product started moving. And it's based on those algorithms and those studies that everybody does, is what is consumer demand. The problem is, even though you're right, we've returned a lot to what we think is pre-COVID, but we haven't. How many people are working from home right now? How has consumer purchasing changed? E-commerce is so much different than it is today. I know so many people who get food delivered to their home now. They just don't even go out to the store anymore. And so that changes how, the estimates were we wouldn't reach this level of e-commerce till 2025. Well, we've exceeded it. And everyone keeps saying, well, it's going to go back to normal. So I got to be prepared for that economy, everybody going back to normal, versus the new economy, which I'm not sure what it's going to be. And I think that's the problem we're having in many places. I can tell you in the United States that a lot of big box stores are ordering goods because they're not sure what the economy is going to be. Should I order a lot of this or a lot of that? But you know what? There's so much shipping out there. I'll just order everything and I'll bring it in. And what it does is it creates a lot of stress on warehouses, distribution centers, and it really overawes the supply chain. And while things may be moving smoothly now, I think one of the big fears later in this year is the supply chain gets so encumbered with goods that we're going to slow it up, and key goods may not be able to be delivered. And it's not because they're not there in South Africa or in the United States. It's just we can't get them out of the ports, or we can't get them out of the warehouses because there's just not enough truck drivers or delivery services to bring it in. And I think that's because we're very responsive to consumers, to consumers and retailers and businesses. I can get you this product. And we're used to it too. We're used to that push button mentality. And it's very hard to tell people you have to wait a little bit longer to do it. I was interviewed at one point during the height of the supply chain, and I had somebody ask me, it's like, well, what can the individual person do to ease the supply chain? It's like, well, don't hit that Amazon next day delivery button. Just give it a day or two. If you don't need that product tomorrow, just give it a day or two. It provides such an ease on the system. But I think you're right. I go back to the toilet paper issue we had. We had a toilet paper shortage. It's like we didn't have a toilet paper shortage. We just were using toilet paper in different areas than we traditionally did. We weren't getting the commercial. People weren't at work. They weren't using that. They were all at home, and that's a different style of toilet paper. And so that's to me is the best reflection of it. And I think right now everybody's trying to figure out is what's this new model we're going to use. And when you look at, for example, commercial real estate and how empty it is in a lot of places, that's because people are working at home. It's changed and people like that model. And if you can support that model, that means your ordering process is going to change. And I think we're still going to be in a flux for about a year till we figure out where we're going to be and how economies adjust to this.
Absolutely. So as you said, business practices are changing, processes are changing. There's so much of automation that is going on within the industry. This because there's labor shortages and there's so much of manual work involved in logistics that you just have to automate it to keep just to stay ahead of the game. Also saying, you mentioned, don't hit that Amazon button today, hit it tomorrow. It's the same, I think, when we talk about the truck transportation and the road freight, and now with this fuel cost, I've seen so many countries now, people are striking and they don't want to work and etc. How does that have an impact on the exports in a country? Because every time a truck is off the road, what is that impact on the industry then?
Yeah, one of the things I keep kind of hitting on here a lot is I do shipping, ocean shipping, but I keep saying, listen, this is all integrated. You can't just look at one aspect of it. You got to look at the ocean shipping, got to look at road, rail, air. It's all integrated together. And remember, the big ocean carriers had been integrated. They had done everything from pickup at the warehouse, in the country of embarkation, all the way to delivery. And now it's kind of segregated out a lot. And so that has a big impact. And so I think one of the things we have to understand is that this impacts everything. So if you have, for example, a trucking strike like we're having right now in California over a piece of legislation, if you have a dock worker strike like you're having in Germany right now, if you're having a trucker strike in England right now, that's really important because those are, delivery points. They're hubs. If Hamburg and Bremerhaven go offline for a brief period of time, there's a lot of containers that are coming from Asia to Europe to America that way. That's going to cause you problems. It's going to cause you backups right there. If you can't get fuel in South Africa, for example, ships that are doing the Cape route, that's really essential for them to be able to do that. If they can't get that fuel, that's going to slow them up. And so all this has to be integrated together. If you cannot integrate these services together, and workers are in a position right now where they have a lot of leverage. They can ask for new wages. They're in kind of high demand. And so we haven't seen labor be in such a strong position. We're seeing that right now on the West Coast of the United States in the negotiation between the ILWU and the PMA. So we're waiting to see how that irons out.
Yes, that's going to be interesting because it's amazing to know that the automation is increasing, but so is the labor demand. So, and I guess in a way it's good because we can increase employment, but we have to create that work from home positions available, which was never available in logistics or supply chain environments before. So that would be really...
And as you know, the supply chain has been sometimes very slow in adopting new technologies. And, you could talk to truck drivers who are still, passing papers between each other. And, to automate systems is, a lot of places you're not going to get new land for container terminals. You've got to improve the throughput. How can you make it so that you can get the containers out of the yard faster? And a lot of that is automation. And automation scares labor for good reasons. But lots of times what automation does is improve the throughput and actually increases, in some cases, employment in new areas. You phase out older jobs, but you bring in these new, maybe higher level tech jobs that will improve the logistics flow.
Absolutely. And so altogether, you're increasing business growth and economic growth, and it just goes on. Thank you so much, Sal. You've been amazing. Just to end it off, is there anything, any predictions in the supply chain industry that you can predict in the near future, or any anything that you can help our viewers to, assist them in to mitigate some of the risks in the supply chain industry?
Well, a couple of things. I think number one is the availability of information out there is probably better than ever before. There's more, mainstream attention to this subject than ever before, but there's also a lot of really great expertise. I'm not calling myself an expert by any means, but there's a lot of great expertise out there so that you can get some visibility on some areas that in the past may not have existed, so that you can find out about ocean shipping, you can see routes, you can see how companies are performing. More importantly, there's a lot of interest in it among younger people. I think one of the problems we've seen is trying to get some really talented people into supply chain, and there's so many different areas that are open to them right now. As a university professor, I have students come to me all the time. It's like, well, how do I get into this? What can I do within the supply chain? And it's a diverse group that's in it. It's diverse in its makeup. It's diverse in the opportunities, the experiences out there. And I think one of the other things we need to do is really increase the social media platform of a lot of logistics groups. Get out. What do you do? How do you do this? How do I get involved in this? What do we, it's amazing how many people become interested in this. My very small social media presence has gotten me access to people I never thought I would have or ask me for my opinion, which amazes me to this day. And, I think it allows people to really visualize the supply chain in a much better way. Most of the supply chain is invisible to us. We take it for granted. We think it's going to always be there, but it's not. And as more visibility gets to it, I think more people get interested in it. They understand it better, and it means there's more opportunity in it. We see a lot of people investing in it now, really wanting to put some venture capital into this, and a lot more startups. There'll be a lot of startups happening that will collapse because they don't have the experience. But there's a lot of experienced hands out there in the supply chain that you can tap into to really help you move forward.
Thank you. That is amazing. Thank you for breaking it down for us. And as you said, you have such a unique way of explaining shipping and the industry, and showing us exactly what needs to be done. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much for your time, Sal. It's much appreciated.
It was a pleasure being with you, and I appreciate the opportunity. And again, if you want, you can follow me on YouTube at What's Going On with Shipping.
Awesome. So maybe you can just, so you said your YouTube channel is What's Going On in Shipping, and then you have your LinkedIn channel as well. Am I right? Any
Yep.
other social media channels?
Yeah, I'm also on Twitter at Mercogliano, Mercoglianos.